I want to start now by looking at how to open up your files once you've downloaded them for your projects. And then we're going to go through that, and I will go through all of the steps on how to do this first project. So step one is you want to download your lab one getting started from the Locator Map page. And once you do that, you'll get this file that's called a zip file. And basically what this does is it takes a few files, puts them together into one single file, and compresses them down so that they're a smaller file size. So if you double click on this, Windows now has a built-in zip program. We can go up here to extract all, and it's going to ask you where you want to start, where you want to extract all your data to. I recommend that you make a folder that you're going to put all of your GIS work in. You can see that I have mine just in Geog 265 folder lab 1. So let's browse. We'll go to our lab 1 folder there, and we select and we extract. Alright, and so what this is going to do is it's going to extract all of this data out, and then we can close out of this page. Right? Alright, so if we go to our my folders and we go to our documents, which is where I have mine, and I have mine in that geog, and then we go into lab 1. All right, we have lab 1 getting started. This was what we just unzipped. So inside this folder you'll see that there's a lot of files here. The one you want to start with is the Word document. So all of these files here are individual pieces that make up shape files, and you'll get to see what a shape file is pretty soon here once we get started. But if you open up this Word document, you'll get the instructions, looks like this, of what you're supposed to do for this lab. So this next part that I'll do is I will walk you through. We'll open up Arc, and I will walk you through the steps that you use to do this project. So once you've opened up ArcMap, you'll get a page that looks like this. Now I've actually used mine, so I have some recent files in here, but you guys shouldn't have anything in here that shows up. So your next step that you want to do is you want to go over here. You see it says existing maps. You want to say browse for more, and then in here you want to go and find your folder where you extracted that zip file. So remember we were in Geography 265, Lab 1, Lab 1 getting started. So we say OK. And right here you have this save file for ARC that's called getting started. And if you click on that and click open, it will open up to this. Now we can, let's close this for starters. All right. So what we have here is a map of the U.S. And so in this map of the U.S., we have the state outlines. So what we're going to use this for is this is going to be what is called our locator map. So we're going to eventually build a map that shows all of the counties in Oregon. But for people who might not know where Oregon is, this will be the locator map to show them where in the U.S. Oregon is located. Now, depending on what you're doing and who your audience is, your locator map may, for example, say if you're talking about Coos Bay and your audience is mostly people from Oregon, your locator map may just be the map of Oregon with a zoomed in spot that says, all right, here's where Coos Bay is, or here's where, the Millicoma River drainage, something along those lines. If you're looking to a broader audience that, you might have, hey, this is where the U.S. is on a map of the world, something like that. So it all depends on what your audience is, to what scale your locator map goes out to. All right, so with this, we want to click on the existing maps. We've already opened this up. So we've got our map open up right here, right? So if you look over here at our table of contents, you'll see that you have everything kind of located in this nested point here. And you see locator map is currently blackened out, like it's bold. If we go over here and we right click where it says Oregon, we can go down here and we can say activate. If we activate that, it brings in just a map of Oregon. So these are what are called data frames. So we actually have 2 different data frames open right now. So let's go back to our locator map. Now these toolbars up here can be adjusted. You can pick which ones you want. It's all customization for what you do when you're making maps and how the workflow works best for you. I have a few open up here. This is a layout that I like, but yours doesn't have to look like this. It's basically what you are doing and how it makes sense. You can have some of these bars if you want it. You can have them down on the sides. You can customize what is in those bars. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can do with these. And to see which toolbars are available, if you right click over here in just a blank space, you get this whole list of toolbars, right? So you can see which ones that I have selected. They'll have a little check bar next to them. But then you can also do custom ones where you can just put a single tool out here. If there's something that you find that you're using on a regular basis that you don't want an entire toolbar for it, it's just a certain part of it, you can just have these, you can have just a single tool. So say, for example, you just use the measurement tool out of this group. You could just pull that measurement tool and have it sitting here as a single tool in a custom version. So that's all personal preference. And like I said, you can set it up how you like. So like I said before, you have your table of contents over here. We have the locator map that is active. We want to go over and you want to right click on Oregon and we want to activate Oregon. So what we're going to do with Oregon is we're going to add a layer to this set. So if you go up here to this little plus mark here, it says add data. You'll click on that and that will bring you into whatever was your last folder you have open. For me, it was something for work. If I drop out of here, I go into my Geography 265, my Lab 1 folder, the Getting Started folder. You have 3 files here, right? You have your US state file, which is already open. And up here, you have your Oregon shape file, which is already open, and you have one that's called counties. We want to add counties to this data frame. So we select it and we click add. And see, it drops in your county files. Now you'll notice on this, if we zoom in, and as you guys have been messing around with your mouse and your keyboard and everything, I'm sure you've noticed that the zoom in and zoom out for ARC is counterintuitive to pretty much anything else that has the mouse roller. Typically you'd roll forward to zoom in and roll backwards to zoom out. In ARC, it's a complete opposite of that. If you haven't messed around with the little scroll roller on your mouse, that is how you zoom in and out. So if we zoom in here, you'll notice that these 2 layers don't necessarily match up. And there's a reason for that. This is actually showing some of the off-the-coast buffering around the state. It's showing parts of the river that may be shared with Washington and a few other things like that. Also, if you think about this in terms of scale, this is I downloaded this county map from the state geodatabase of available files. And since it's a state file, it's a little bit more accurate, where the one that I downloaded that showed all of the United States, it's a much bigger scale, so or smaller scale. It's zoomed out further, so it doesn't have to be as accurate, right? So we're showing the entirety of the United States, but so your accuracy along your edges might not necessarily need to be as precise as what that county map was showing. So let's go back in here, and we are going to reactivate this. And the way, just so that you know, the way that I created the Oregon map is I actually I selected this Oregon state shape and I exported it out and created and made it into its own file. I'll show you how to do that a little bit later on, not in today's lab, but in one of the future labs. So let's go back in here and we'll reactivate this. So let's zoom back out. And a good way to zoom back out to show everything that you're looking at here is you can either go over here, say if you had the county maps and you only want it to zoom out to that, you can right click on that and you can say zoom to layer. That bumps you back out. You also have some zoom features here. This will zoom you to your full extent of whatever your active data frame is. In this case, it was already zoomed out to that county. Say if we reactivate the locator map and we're zoomed in here, if we go to full extent here, it zooms us out and pulls in. It's zoomed way out because it actually has some of the territories on here as well as Hawaii. And you have the Virgin Islands down here. You have a little bit of stuff. So this gives you basically a full extent of the U.S. But we don't need it to be zoomed out that much because we're just going to have our locator map show the contiguous. All right, so we'll zoom back into that just manually for right now. Now let's go back in and we're going to activate our Oregon layer. All right, so what we want to do with this is we want to have our Oregon layer is going to be the outline for the whole state. And then we want our county layers to be inside. So to do that, let's change our table of contents a little bit. So it makes things perhaps a little bit more, so the names make a little bit more sense. So let's go over here and we can right click on here and you can either go to properties and in properties under general, you can change your layer name here from Oregon. Let's change it to state outline. Let me say okay. And you see that changes it over here. This isn't actually changing the name of the file. So it's only changing how it appears here in the table of contents. Its file name and its route and everything is still staying as Oregon original. And then we have county over here. And let's another way you can do it is if you do kind of the slow click. So it opens up the slow double click. It opens up this dialog here, and then let's call this counties. All right. So now we have counties, and we have state outline. Okay. Now, as you can see here, they kind of superimpose on top of each other. And if you think about the way that your maps work, the order that they're in here in this stack is the order they're stacked over here on the map. So if you just think about this as pieces of paper, this shows you where those pieces of paper are in the pile. And over here is just the pile. So you can take this and we could drag that below, right? And then that puts state outline on top of counties, and vice versa. But what we want to do is we want to have the state outline basically just be a solid line that shows the state outline. So to do that, you can go over here. There's multiple ways to do this. You can, once again, you can right click and go down to properties and you can go to display. And in display, you have some features here and you can go to symbology as well. So in display, you can change what your transparency is of the layer. In symbology, you can actually change what your value looks like. So if you double click where that green square is there, if you double click on that, it opens up this dialog here. Like I said, we want this to just be the outline of the state so we can make it hollow. Its outline is now black. it automatically fixed that for hollow. So these are some of the default things that you can use. Some of these are standard for different types of maps. So like this is the symbol for a reservoir, mangroves, wetlands. These are standardized symbols that you might find. So when you click on one of those, it just automatically pulls in all the properties for that. We just went with hollow. By default, hollow, the outline color is solid black and outline width is 0.4. We want to increase that. We want to make our outline layer a little bit thicker. Okay, so to do that, let's increase the thickness to 2.0. So if we just click up on that little side arrow there, it brings it up to 2.0. Either that or you could just type 2 in. And then we say OK. And then we say OK. And there you go. Now you see that our outline is a big, thick outline color, right? The other thing that you might notice is like if we were to go in here, there's ways that you can turn layers off. So there's these little check marks next to it. So if we were to uncheck counties, then counties is no longer showing up here. It's still in the table of contents, but it's just no longer showing up. If we click on it again, it comes back in. So let's go in and let's change our counties. We don't need it to be blue. Let's change it so that we have a hollow design for our counties, and we'll make our outline 0.4. All right, so to do that, this is the other way you can do that. So instead of going right-clicking and going into properties like we did before, if you go to where that little purple square is there, you double-click on it, and it brings up this dialog. Now, like I said, we're going to make it hollow. By default, it goes to black, and it goes to 0.4. So let's take a look and see how that looks. That looks pretty good, right? So we now have our counties as decent, dark lines that you can see with a white background. So the next step we want to do is we want to adjust our locator map so that it is showing where Oregon is on the map of the lower 48. So if we go over here to locator map, we right click and we go down to activate. I've already changed my name. It was kind of a long string here with some numbers. I changed it to US states. Just like everything else, it makes a little bit more sense. Once again, you can do that by either slow clicking on this or going into the properties and changing it. So from here, we want to do a little bit, because this map, this is about the extent we want to be zoomed in for our locator map. You can still see a little bit of Alaska, and you can see Puerto Rico, and you can see the U.S. Virgin Islands. If you were unsure which islands you were looking at down here, you can click on this little blue eye here and go and you click on something, and it brings up the information for that. So you have Puerto Rico, and it has all the other information that might be included in the attributes table. We'll talk about attributes tables in a different section. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to go in and we're going to change what this looks like, right? So we want to do something a little bit more technical than just changing everything. So the double clicking on this wouldn't work. We want to actually go in, right click on US states and go into properties. Once we're in properties, we want to go to symbology, and then we want to go to categories. And then in categories, we are going to go here and we're going to do this drop down, and we see that there's a name, and that's the name of our states. And let me just back out real quick and I'll show you how you can figure that out. So if you were to right click over here on US states again and go to open attributes table, this is your attributes table. This is all the information that for each one of those polygons. In this case, the polygons are either a state or a territory. So say for example, West Virginia, you have all of this information for it. That's included in here. Not every attribute table is going to have a lot of information. Some of them will have a lot more than that. But you can see here that this column is called name, and it has the names of the states and of the territories. And what I did just there is I had selected that field. If you zoom out over here, you can actually see that on the map, that's also selected there now as well. And then I don't want it selected, so I click this little button up here that says clear selections, and that clears that selection. All right. So we're going to close the attributes table. And like I said, we'll talk more about attributes tables in the future and how you use them, how you manipulate them, how you add data to them, that sort of thing. So we're going to right click on here. We're going to go to properties. And in here, we're in symbology. So we want to go to categories again. We know that the field name had all the names in it, right? And then we can add a value. So if we go over here and we click add values, we get this whole list here. So like I said, we said we wanted to change what Alaska looks like, right? So let's add Alaska. And then we're going to add a value here. We definitely want Oregon, right? We say OK. And then we had the U.S. Virgin Islands and we had Puerto Rico, right? So if we scroll down here, Puerto Rico, say OK. And we add a value, and we have the United States Virgin Islands. All right, so we have all those added, right? And now here you can see, if I was just to say apply, right? When I applied, all those values that we added, those colors come in, right? So now all of a sudden Oregon's this color, Alaska's that color, Puerto Rico's that, and the U.S. Virgin Islands are this, right? We actually don't want to be able to see Alaska, the Virgin Islands, or Puerto Rico. So if we go over here, and just like before, if you were to double click over here, we can double click here, and we can essentially make this so that it doesn't show up. We can say hollow, and we can make our outline width 0. We say OK to that. And Alaska won't show up anymore once we click apply. And we can do the same thing to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. So we say hollow, go 0, hollow, 0, say OK. All right. Now what we want to do is we want to have Oregon as a light shade of gray, right? So if we click on this, we can go up to our fill color, and we can pick a shade of gray here. I don't remember if the instructions suggested what they suggested for our percentage. It looks like 50% gray. So we want to do our fill color as 50% gray. So you see if you hover over a value for a second, it gives you what it is. So this is our 50% gray. And then we say our outline color, we want to keep it black, and we want it to be 0.4 is fine. So we say OK. And then we can click apply here. When we click apply here, you see that Alaska has disappeared now, and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands have disappeared. They're still there. We could change what their values look like, and they would come back. So even though this is not a way to delete a feature from a shapefile, it's just a way to make it so that you can't see it. All right. And now we want to go up to this all other values. And if we go up to this all other values, we can click on that. And we want to change that to hollow. And we say OK. And then we click apply. And if we do that, then we say OK. Say we have a locator map. We have the lower 48 with just Oregon showing up. So the next thing we want to do is we want to go into our layout view. Our layout view is going to show us what our final map is going to look like. So there's multiple ways to do this. We can go into view up here. We click layout view, or down here on the bottom, you have these two little icons. One's data view and one's layout view. Either method works. We go into here, we go to layout view. Now you see we have a whole bunch of stuff that's overlapped here. We have our Oregon map and we have our locator maps. They're both on the same page. Let's drag them so they're a little bit separate here, right? So, and you can see that our organ map, or our locator map, is actually quite big. So there's a few first steps that we want to do. In this case, we want to keep our orientation in portrait. So this is fine the way it is. But we also want to go over here. If we right click over here where there's nothing going on the map, we can go to page and print setup. And you want to use printer page settings. And then you want to show printer margins on layout. And we say OK. All right. So by default, all the data frames in ARC are going to have a box around them. We don't necessarily want this. Sometimes you'll want a box around your data frame, but in this case we don't. So we want to go in and we want to change it so that that box is not there anymore. So if we go over here and we click on this, and we can right click inside this and go to properties. Inside of here we have data frame. Oh, never mind. We have frame, excuse me. And it shows up as a border. If we go here and we say, we scroll all the way up to the top, we can go to none and we can say OK. And see what that did is if we click over here, it's still got this dotted line around it, but that's just because that is currently our selected data frame. If we go over here and we activate this data frame, that dotted line goes away. So it just had to do with the fact that that data frame was selected. So now that this one's selected, we can right click here, we can go to properties, we can go to frame, and we can make this none as well. So there we go. And say OK. So we're going to want to change a few of the things here. So this is our locator map. Let's right click in here. We'll go to properties and we can go to size and position. Now we want to put it in the bottom left, or the bottom left hand corner. So that's where that is. But we want to make it, let me see, I scroll through the instructions here. I think it was 2.5 by 2 inches, I believe. It is. So in here we can go width, 2.5, height, 2. And we can say OK. And see, it brought it down here and it put it where we want it to be. But you can see we're zoomed in way too far, right? So if you double click inside of here, you get this kind of slashed line around there. And when you're on the slashed line around something, it actually lets you, should be letting me do this. Oh, I know why, because I have, I need to activate this. That's why. We can change the scale now. So we can go up here to what our scale is, and we have a 1 by 16, and we can zoom out. So let's just zoom out a little bit. With our fix zoomed out, we might even get what we want here. That's not quite what we want, right? So it's perhaps a little too zoomed out. So we'll zoom back in one more fixed, and we can see that's not quite what we want either because the East Coast is cut off a little bit. So if you look at here where it says, where it has your scale, your 1 by 100 million here, and if we do a fixed zoomed out, we're 1 by 25. So let's go somewhere in between. 1 by 125. So let's go somewhere in between here. Maybe say 1 by 115. You still have to say enter. And see, that zoomed us in a little bit there. Maybe go 1 by 120. Nope, too much. So maybe 110. That looks nice, right? So we look like we're pretty good there. You know, it looks like we've got stuff where we want it to be. So now we have our organ map up here. Our organ map is obviously the focus of this page. So we can manually stretch this one out a little bit. We can bring it over a little bit towards the edges and over a little bit towards the edges. And then we can zoom in to where we want it. Maybe one more? No, a little too much. So, and you can see there your 1 by 4 million there, 1 by 5 million there. So let's try 500. It's a little too much. So we'll go 4. A little more than that, right? So maybe 4,250,000. Nope. Wait. Never mind. Went the wrong direction, which is not uncommon to do. We want to go 475. How does that look? That looks good, right? So we're using up a good amount of our map. We have our locator map down here. We have a little bit of empty space on our map. We want to try to avoid too much empty space. And you can see in the example of what we want our map to look like. We can zoom down, or if you look in the directions, you know, you want to take up a good amount of the page. And while we're looking at this, we can be like, all right, so maybe since Oregon is a little wider than it is tall, let's look at changing the shape of our map here. So let's right click out here on our map and go to page and print setup. And instead of it being in portrait, let's look at landscape and say okay to that, right? All right, so if we're in landscape, this looks like it might work better, right? So we can take our locator map, we can drop it down a little bit here, perhaps. And we can take our organ map, reposition it here, maybe stretch it out a tiny bit. And so even though we have overlap of our layers here, this isn't a big deal. You'll still at the final, you'll still be able to see this. You just don't want this map to overlay your locator map. So let's try some fixed zoom in and out a little bit here and see what we get. So that looks actually pretty decent. Can we go one more? Nope, we went too far. Let's look at 3,500,000. How about? Let's go 3,250,000. And as you can see, oh, geez, I went the wrong way again. 750,000. Higher number zoomed out, lower number zoomed in. As you can see, a lot of this is just tinkering until you get your project to look like you want it to look. All right. So that looks okay, right? We've got Oregon here. We've got a locator map here. And now, so another thing that you want to put onto your maps is what's called a neat line. So if we right click over here, we can actually go nope, never mind. We want to go up to insert, and we want to insert a neat line. And so we want to place this not around all of our elements, but we want to place from the inside margin. So if we go here, we click this, and we make our gap 5 points. That means it's going to be 5 points from the margin. And we can make our neat line, let's say 2. Let's see how that looks. And we'll say okay. All right, so that gives us from the inside of our print margins, with our printer settings, a neat line that comes in. Okay. So something that all of your maps you should have on here is some sort of scale bar and a north arrow. If it's needed, also a title. So let's insert a title. Okay. So we can go insert title. We're going to call this Oregon. We say okay. Now that's kind of a small title, right? So it's there. You can double click on it and brings up a font page here. And we can go to change symbol. And then this brings up a font page that you probably would recognize a little bit more. So we can keep it Arial. You can change it to something else if you want. If you're not a fan of Arial, let's just keep it Arial for right now. Let's see what a 36-point font looks like. See how big that is. We'll say apply. That looks pretty decent. Maybe we want to change the symbol, and since it's our title, let's make it bold. Okay, say apply. That looks all right. I honestly think that Arial looks a little, I don't want to say childish, but perhaps not professional. So let's change our symbol here, and let's maybe find something that we like a little bit better. Let's go with a tried and true Times New Roman. The reason why it gets used a lot. That actually looks pretty decent, I think. You might disagree. And this is one of those things that is definitely your taste. Just don't go ridiculous on it. You don't want the title of your map to take away from what your map is actually trying to show. So let's say okay. So we have our title in here, right? We have our locator map. Let's add in a north arrow. Once again, north arrows come in many different styles. You can pick one. Some of them are way more elaborate than others, and like with the title, you don't want your elaborate north arrow to take away from the detail you're trying to show in your map. There might be a reason that you're going to use an elaborate north arrow, but let's just go with something simple. We can scroll down here and see what we've got. Honestly, I like this one. I'll just say okay to that. And it's going to drop it right kind of here in the middle. You can grab it just by left clicking on it, and we can drag it over. So let's put it here right now. Now, let's put in a scale bar, right? So we can say insert. We can insert a scale bar. Now, with our scale bar, once again, we have a few options here. So I say we go, and what I would probably, as we go on, I'll actually show you some different ways to manipulate your scale bars and change your scale bars. Let's just go with this one for right now. We'll say okay, and we can drop this down here too. Now, since we have Oregon is our active data frame, this scale bar is for this data frame. It is for the state of Oregon scale bar. If by some chance you had your locator map as your active data frame, when you did your scale bar then would be for the entire US. So your scale bar obviously would be quite different than what this shows. So you want your scale bar to go not for your locator map, but for your main map. You don't need to put a scale bar on your locator map. So this kind of has all stacked up here. Now I'll show you why I like some of these layout keys up here. And like I said, I believe that one is actually just called layout. There's a few features in here that I really like. And one of them allows you to take a whole bunch of features and make sure that they're lined up in a center. So we can take our locator map here, or not our locator map, our Oregon map, right? And we already have that off a little bit. So let's pull that over here, and we'll kind of get it towards the center. If we click on that, and then we click on our north arrow, push control, click on the scale bar and click on the title, then you can see up here we can align everything to the margins, or we can align them all to the center. We go like that, and that just shifted everything around so that all of these features are lined up on their center of each other. Not necessarily the center of the page, but all centered to each other. So, and that gives us a nice looking map that's almost complete. You have a little bit of empty space here, but I think we're okay with that. Your spacing here is a little bit off, but I think we're okay with that too. We could probably go over here, activate this, drop it down just a tiny bit. See how that looks? That looks all right, right? So, you know, it's about how your layout is, how much empty space you have, why the empty space is there. And then the final thing we're going to do, typically we would add in a source for our data. This is just very general mapping data. I do believe I pulled this from the state geodatabase warehouse. So we could put that as our source, but we're just going to leave this okay. We don't need to put a source on that. But the final thing I do want you to do is I need you to insert, and I want you to insert text, and it's going to drop it in right up here in the middle again, right? And you can click off of that, and then if you click back onto it, it lets you drag it. And then to change what it says, double click it. It says text right there, right? And we're going to put your name. And then we're going to put what the date is. So 09/24 -20. All right. Once again, we already had that as we did Times New Roman up here. So let's change this to Times New Roman as well. Say okay. And now it also has these feature here. Since we know we're going to put it over here in this right hand corner, let's make it so it's aligned to the right. That means that the two lines, their far edge will be on the right hand side. So we say okay to that, and we say okay, right? And so like I said, we're aligned to the right, we're over there. Now you can just take this and you can drag it over, and you can put it kind of how you like it. Now, if we had a source, one of the things I would do is I would use these features up here, and I would click on this text box, and I'd click on this text box, and I'd make sure, like, say the top of them was lined up, or the bottom of them was lined up, so that you had uniformity across your map here. If you want to move these around a little bit, if you use the arrow keys just by themselves, once you've clicked on it, it makes big jumps. If you push shift in the arrow keys, it makes little tiny jumps. So if you need to do little micro movements to shift where your name is, or anything else, say like this north arrow or something, or you know, this box here, say if we wanted to move it down a little bit, you can use those keys to do that. So, all right. That is our final map. So what do we do with this? Well, as we were going along, and I didn't save this because this is kind of my working map that I start from the beginning with. But as you were going along, you'd want to be saving this project periodically. And it basically what it does is it saves all of this layout stuff plus all of your titles, your scale bars, the north arrow, how far you're zoomed in, and things like that. It doesn't actually change what's going on with these shapefiles. If you were to bring these shapefiles into a different map, they'd come in as they came in originally. But it does save them. It saves all the changes that you've done to them as this project. So that's that getting started MXD file that you opened up to start with. That's what this is. It pulls in all of these different pieces and tells it what to do with them. But what I want you guys to do is you'll have it saved, right? But then I want you to go up here, you click on File, you go down to Export Map, all right, and it brings up this dialog here. And I want you to export it as a PDF. So it actually defaults to PDF. And what I want you to do is I want you to call this your last name and then lab 1, okay? And export it as a PDF and click Save. And then finally, there are a handful of questions at the end of this lab. And so I want you to answer those questions in a Word document and attach and submit that Word document as well. So there won't always be questions at the end of these, just occasionally. This is just a more, because like I said in one of my first videos, this really builds on itself. So this lab seems perhaps a little long and tedious in the detail of how long the directions are. But in reality, as we start making maps, you're going to do a lot of these end steps at least for every single map you make. You're going to put in neat lines. You're going to put in a north arrow. You're going to put in a scale bar. So it's good to have this information kind of down in your head of how to do all of these things. As you use them more, it will become second nature. And as you saw with me when I was adjusting my scale, my brain always messes up the order that I put those in. That when I go to a smaller number, it actually zooms it in more instead of out more. So, which makes sense, but when you're typing it, your brain breaks. So the more you use it, the better you'll get at it. But these questions here are just kind of to reinforce some of those things in your brain of remembering how to do these different steps.